evaluation component you described as impeccable business credentials. How will that kick in? Is there another part to this?
Yeah, they will. There will be, and I'll just actually turn it over to Lon because he'll be best to address that.
I'm going to play to my strengths. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. I've never told anybody I was Red Auerbach. I have no expectation of taking the lead on those kinds of talent evaluation questions. My first order of priority is to bring somebody in here who is a basketball genius. We have some basketball geniuses here. I've spent my whole career surrounded by geniuses, and I expect to continue to do that. What I'm going to try to do is bring my discipline, my processes, my abilities to raise the level of preparation so that we are exhausted of it in everything we do. But at the end of the day, we're going to have a first-rate talent evaluator because that's not where my strength is, and I'm not pretending otherwise. And that will be a first order of business, and we'll take our time to get the right person here. But I think you can bring somebody into this structure who can thrive in it, because this is just a wonderful place.
Lon, could you take us through the kind of timeline of how this all came about? And you were at one point kind of, I wouldn't say working both sides of the fences, but you're representing a player, and you knew this was a possibility at that time. Was that a difficult situation? And just when did this all start in terms of you being?
That's a fair question. I've always prided myself on having the highest sense of ethics and responsibility. Now, I have to say, sometimes in this industry, it's like the one-eyed man is king in the land of the blind. So it's I don't want to overstate my credentials in that area, but I was very sensitive to those issues. Robert and I started talking probably in June about a transaction involving Hito. This was not the only team we were talking to. We had come up with this concept of amending his contract to relieve some of the financial burden on a team, because he very much wanted to leave Toronto, and they very much wanted him to leave. I mean, it was not a good marriage. Sometimes that happens. So over the course of time, we had many conversations about that. And when I began to sense that there might be an opportunity for me here, I immediately recused myself from those discussions, and of course had full disclosure with Hito, and at some point had full disclosure particularly with those other clients who were free agents, so as to avoid being in a situation where someone could accuse me of steering somebody in one way or another. So I think we handled it appropriately. I've always had the best interests of my clients first and foremost in my mind. I try to do that here as well. And now my loyalties are to this great organization.
So you turned it over to somebody else?
Turned it over to my partner, Jim Tanner, who's uniquely qualified to handle it, and explained it to the players, and they were, fully understanding of it.
Robert, you mentioned earlier that you thought this was a way into the future. We can see more and more of this. Why do you say that?
Well, I think, in terms of the tools available in our industry, from an analytics standpoint, from a data standpoint, and also looking at the idea that my hunch is over time there's going to be more parity in the league, that it's going to be more and more, maybe not quite as much how much money people spend, but how wisely they spend it and how they deal within the parameters of the system. And I think as the system changes, it's going to be more and more important to be able to have a really good, firm understanding of what I call the business side of basketball, which is really the collective bargaining agreement, the cap, how that works, and all the analytics that are out there. One of the things for me that was really interesting about interviewing, I started with a list of maybe 20 candidates that I had information on, and I spoke with about a dozen. And one of the good things about that is you get to learn about how other people see your organization, and you get to learn about what other people do in their organization and things that are out there. And as I began to learn more and more about kind of where organizations are trending, you begin to see more and more as to really what your needs are for the future. And that's really where I became excited about the opportunity with someone like Lon, who really will bring a lot of skill set in some of those areas that I think are going to become increasingly more important in having a successful team.
Lon, why did it not work with Hito in Toronto, and what makes you believe it will work better here?
Sometimes the best laid plans go amiss. They were very enthusiastic about having him. He was enthusiastic about going there. I think Hito, and he's going to be here in the next couple of days, I think Hito had a rough summer last summer because of free agency, because first of all, he had never played so long into June, with the Magic going to the finals. Then he had his free agency, which is always a turbulent, exhausting process for a player. And then he had World Championships. And so he had a very, very busy summer, and I'm not sure he was quite where he needed to be when he arrived in Toronto. And then I think there were issues that arose in Toronto, and the way they used him and other things. It's just one of those things that didn't work out. But I know Hito. I've known him for a long time. He's going to be highly motivated to come here. And don't forget, 2 years ago, he really carried that team on his back to the finals. And it was an extraordinary performance that showed not just his skill, but his courage, which is something you always want in a player. So I'm excited he's coming here. It'll be nice to have a familiar face. Obviously, I'm excited that Grant's here. I'm taking particular pleasure in the fact that for the last week or so, he started to call me boss, which is a nice change.
Robert, can you talk about the new structure, having a new layer of management, if you will, how that'll change or impact decision-making?
Well, I think there's really 4 areas that you got to do really well at. Evaluating talent, negotiating contracts, understanding the CBA, and communicating with players and agents and coaches and things. And the more and more I got to kind of thinking about how you do really well at all those, the more I started thinking that I'm not so sure one person can do all those really, really well. They're kind of different skill sets, and sometimes they take different personalities. And that really what maybe made the most sense was to put together a team, and rather than kind of bring someone in who is more of a generalist in all those areas, but have 2 people that are specialists that really can give us the best, so that we're really good at all 4. Part of how that all comes together is going to be Lon's decision. I mean, he's ultimately going to be responsible for the whole basketball operations and for the work that comes out of that department. I will say we've made a couple small changes and steps here recently. A few other things that I feel are important that I've kind of gathered a little bit. One is this whole process of scouting in terms of the time and energy and effort and dollars you spend on college scouts versus NBA scouting. I always find our business kind of interesting. And I've been guilty of it too. You take this whole year to scout college players, teams do, and have just an elaborate process that goes through for a year, in a lot of analysis and a lot of detail and a lot of work watching and scouting and evaluating, and then you sign a player to a $8 million, $9 million contract. Then 3 days later, you go spend $70 million on a free agent like this. And so to me, it's almost like we got a little bit backwards. So one of the things that Lon and I have talked about is we're going to have dedicated NBA scouting staff whose full-time job will be to scout NBA players. And we will really focus in on that, especially having, I was a little bit involved in the free agency this year, and Phoenix is really, Jerry did a great job establishing Phoenix as a place that players want to play. And a lot of it was the work he did to make an environment, and I've tried to continue with some of that to make it a place that people want to be.